What really happened when 90% of life on Earth disappeared? Dear traveler, greetings. Today we embark on a journey to the edges of time, to an unrecognizable, suffocating, and broken Earth. A world on fire, where volcanoes relentlessly roar, spewing oceans of lava and clouds of ash. The seas acidify, the winds carry toxic gases, and the sky, once a bearer of life, becomes a shroud of heat and death. It is the Permian, 252 million years ago, the stage of the greatest extinction our planet has ever known. In this planetary furnace, life falters, extinguishing by the millions, and yet, at the heart of the cataclysm, it prepares for its return. But before setting off on a new adventure, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel to not miss anything. Thank you, and safe travels. Between 259 and 252 million years before our era, during a period known as the Lopingian, the continents slowly came together to form a single massive landmass, Pangaea. This was one of the major turning points in Earth's history. Most of the emerged lands were then connected, united by the gradual collision of ancient tectonic plates. This convergence led to the closure of two ancient oceans, the Paleotethys and the Rhaetic. The Paleotethys, or ancient Tethys, was a vast ocean separating several continental blocks before their convergence. It slowly closed over time with tectonic movements, just like the Rhaetic Ocean, which stretched between Laurentia, Baltica, and Gondwana. The gradual disappearance of these two oceans transformed marine currents, reshaped coastlines, and altered the migration routes of many aquatic species. These major changes, however, occurred over millions of years. Pangaea took on a global C shape, surrounding a vast central area. In this hollow, large intracratonic basins, depressions far from coasts formed. These zones accumulated sediments from the erosion of nearby mountains, giving rise to immense alluvial plains. Over time, these basins structured terrestrial ecosystems by hosting fertile soils, waterways, and lush vegetation. The Hercynian chains, also known as Variscan, resulted from an older mountain formation due to continental collisions in the Carboniferous. By the Lopingian period, these reliefs were already eroding. Despite a generally dry climate, winds and rains were sufficient to erode the peaks and carry the sediments to the surrounding basins. Gradually, these mountains lost much of their original altitude. With Pangaea almost fully formed, the circulation of deep and surface marine waters, known as thermohaline circulation, was heavily impeded. The unified landmasses blocked oceanic currents, reducing the exchange of heat and nutrients. As a result, the oxygenation of deep waters decreased, and certain coastal or internal marine areas became stagnant. This lack of renewal favored the emergence of extreme conditions in many ecosystems. When the shape of the continents prevents polar or equatorial currents from flowing freely, entire zones become true isolated basins. In these environments, salinity and temperature fluctuate greatly with the seasons. On the surface, water can exceed 30 degrees or 86 degrees Celsius under intense sunlight, while the poorly mixed depths lack oxygen. Without constant renewal, marine life in these areas weakens, making these ecosystems much more vulnerable. On the lands of Pangaea, the climate was often dry, dominated by arid or semi-arid zones. Because of the immensity of the supercontinent, many regions found themselves far from the oceans, deprived of their rains. Precipitation was rare, evaporation intense, and basins regularly dried up, giving way to vast deserts or dusty plains. The erosion of the ancient Hercynian reliefs fed this landscape, dispersing fine sediments that accumulated on the coasts or at the heart of the lands. The massive form of Pangaea also influenced life on the land. Drought-resistant plants dominated the poor soils, while the valleys formed by ancient Hercynian chains sometimes offered more fertile areas. Primitive reptiles and other animals adapted to these contrasting environments, often concentrating around the rare water points. Overall, the formation of Pangaea heralded a major transition. The Lopingian represented the final chapter of a geological era, just before the great upheavals to come. At the end of the Permian, about 260 million years ago, the Earth had a completely different face. Almost all continents were joined in a single block, surrounded by a single ocean. This supercontinent favored a dry, often arid climate with low precipitation. But more importantly, seasonal contrasts were marked. Scorching summers, with temperatures exceeding 40 degrees Celsius or 104 degrees inland, and winter nights sometimes close to 0 or 32 degrees. The immensity of the continent accentuated these discrepancies. It warmed up quickly under the summer sun, then lost its warmth rapidly in winter. Imagine vast lands far from any oceanic influence. Without the thermal regulation of the seas, temperature variations become extreme. The landscape extends into vast deserts, sparse steppes, and a few isolated oases. Only plants capable of withstanding prolonged drought take root there. As for the animals, they migrate over long distances, fleeing the burning areas to reach more hospitable environments where water and vegetation still persist. Even though the Earth had experienced more pronounced glaciations in the past, the southern part of Pangaea, called Gondwana, still retained significant ice caps. Less extensive than before, they nevertheless influenced sea levels. These are called moderate glacio-eustatic oscillations. Indeed, when the ice advances, sea levels drop. When it melts, they rise. During the late Permian, these variations persist, but remain much more limited than at the peak of glacial ages. The variations in sea level profoundly alter the coastlines, which can recede or advance several hundred kilometers or miles, disrupting coastal ecosystems. Primitive mollusks and corals must constantly adapt to these shifts. The dry climate accentuates salinity in the inland seas. Intense evaporation leaves deposits of gypsum or salt, indicating marked aridity. Faced with these hostile conditions, many marine species migrate to more temperate waters or develop survival strategies suited to heat and high salinity. In this demanding climate, the composition of the atmosphere plays a crucial role. The CO2 level is between 350 and 450 ppm, a moderate level compared to other times. However, the oxygen content reaches nearly 30%, well above the current 21%. Such richness in oxygen stimulates the metabolism of many species, but also increases the risk of spontaneous fires, especially in arid areas. Vegetation on the ground can easily ignite, transforming dry landscapes into gigantic fires. At the end of the Permian, this harsh climate reflects a precarious balance between aridity and residual ice caps, heralding the great geological upheavals to come. At the end of the Permian, just before the major crisis, biodiversity remains surprisingly dynamic. In shallow seas, brachiopods, attached to the bottom by peduncles, filter nutrients through two unequal valves. Their wide distribution reflects a certain stability in marine environments. Alongside them, bryozoans form calcareous colonies similar to tiny reefs, sheltering other invertebrates. As for fusulinids, spiral-shelled unicellular protists, Their sometimes surprising size and abundance make them reference fossils for dating sedimentary layers. On the lands of Gondwana, encompassing Africa, Australia, South America, Antarctica, and India, vast forests of glossopterids extend. These seed ferns, with large triangular leaves, thrive in humid soils subjected to well-marked seasons. Alongside them grow chordatols, with long ribbon-like leaves, considered ancestors of conifers. Together, these plants form dense forests, havens for many insects and animals. Their decomposition enriches the soil, regulates water, and maintains the ecological balance of terrestrial environments. In the semi-arid plains, one encounters synapsid therapsids and pariasaurs. The former herald the evolution of mammals. Among them, the dicynodonts, massive herbivores, sport two large tusks and a beak-like mouth. They grind tough plants and survive with little water. Other therapsids, more slender, rely on their agility to flee or hunt. The pariasaurs, on the other hand, are heavy reptiles armored with bony plates. Their powerful jaws indicate a tough plant-based diet. Slow but massive, they command respect and deter predators. In this still stable landscape, marine and terrestrial life are harmoniously balanced. Brachiopods, bryozoans, and fusilinids thrive in well-oxygenated, nutrient-rich oceans. On the continents, forests of glossopterids and chordatols provide a dense canopy, sheltering a variety of fauna and enriching the soils. In the plains, synapsid therapsids and pariasaurs exploit the available plant resources. Productivity remains high, supported by complex interactions between marine and terrestrial environments. This vibrant mosaic is the result of slow evolutions and precise ecological adjustments. Brachiopods, present since ancient times, survive through filtration. Bryozoans form colonies that shelter other species, while fusilinids, though microscopic, leave remarkable fossil layers. On the lands of Gondwana, dense vegetation supports insects and vertebrates in a balanced food cycle. The cohabitation of synapsid therapsids and pariasaurs illustrates a diversity of adaptations between massive herbivores and opportunistic predators. Until the catastrophe, this ecological balance persists, maintained by a still stable climate. Let's continue our immersion into the pre-catastrophe world by exploring the temperate seas. Brachiopods thrive on nutrient-rich seabeds, while bryozoans form calcareous colonies nourished by plankton. Fusilinids, in turn, deposit their calcareous shells over vast areas. This marine productivity relies on tropical temperatures of about 25 °C or 77 °C, ideal for the growth of microscopic algae. On land, glossopterids dominate the wet plains, while the more resilient chordatols settle in coastal or dry areas. Their reproductive systems ensure widespread seed dispersal. Ubiquitous synapsid therapsids coexist with pariasaurs, protected by their natural armor. Dicynodonts graze on tough foliage, while carnivorous therapsids hunt smaller prey. Between 254 and 253 million years ago, the late Permian marine ecosystems show the first signs of imbalance. Paleontologists observe a marked slowdown in species renewal, known as the diversification rate. In other words, oceans once rich in benthic fauna and various fish now struggle to produce new life forms. This subtle signal marks the beginning of a profound ecological upheaval, signaling an impending major crisis. Alongside this decrease in diversification, an alarming phenomenon emerges on some coasts, notably in South China. Sediments there reveal episodes of massive mortality called red beds. These coastal areas, deprived of oxygen, turn red due to hydrogen sulfide from organic decomposition. This situation, known as coastal euxemia, leads to a true fish and invertebrate massacre already weakened by the ongoing ecological upheavals. The intense red color of these waters is explained by the action of certain oxygen-deprived bacteria. As they develop, they release compounds that oxidize dissolved iron, which then settles as reddish coatings in the sediments. At the same time, increasing nutrient input from the continents stimulates the proliferation of microorganisms that rapidly consume oxygen. In stagnant and overheated waters, sometimes up to 30 Celsius or 86 degrees Celsius, this abrupt deoxygenation exhausts marine organisms and causes massive extinctions. These red pools are not isolated events. They are part of a global process of marine degradation. They reveal an increasing vulnerability of ecosystems whose species struggle to renew themselves. Everywhere, fish, primitive corals, and benthic invertebrates are disappearing locally. Trophic networks are collapsing, prey are becoming scarce, predators are unable to adapt, and productivity is declining. Everything indicates that the oceans are slowly but surely sliding toward a major crisis. Another indicator is attracting the attention of researchers: the increase in the isotopic ratio of strontium, notably the proportion of isotope 87 relative to 86. Each chemical element exists in several forms, called isotopes, which differ in their number of neutrons. When the erosion of the continental crust intensifies, rocks release more strontium-87, causing a detectable increase in marine sediments. This geochemical signal allows the tracing of the evolution of ancient landscapes, indicating an upheaval in progress. But why this acceleration of erosion at this precise time? Several factors combine. Tectonic uplifts expose vast landforms to wear, while an arid climate, punctuated by violent rains, causes sudden floods, carrying enormous amounts of sediments to the seas. This material disrupts the chemical balance of the oceans and promotes anoxic episodes. In geological cores, this translates into an accumulation of terrigenous particles and a marked decline in local biodiversity. At this stage, the decrease in diversification, the red pools, and the increase in strontium isotopes converge. Marine communities weaken, food chains waver, and geochemical disturbances worsen. All these signs reveal a system losing resilience in the face of natural variations. For researchers, these signs are alarms announcing a major crisis. The shift is already visible in sedimentary records, notably through fossil layers. The convergence of these indicators marks a turning point in Earth's history. Coastal waters, once rich in life, become traps for already weakened species. Increased erosion, revealed by the isotopic signature of strontium, intensifies the input of nutrients and minerals, disrupting marine cycles. As life attempts to adapt, ecological tensions build up, quietly preparing the ground for a major biological crisis. These early signals announce the beginnings of a global upheaval. About 253 million years ago, a series of major geological events triggered the formation of the Siberian Traps, one of the largest volcanic complexes ever known. To understand their origin, one must look at the nature of the magmas involved. Sourced from deep within the mantle, these tholeiitic basaltic magmas were rich in iron and magnesium. Their particular chemical composition, revealed in the laboratory, distinguishes them by their high content of ferromagnesian minerals, Rising upward, this magma came into contact with upper geological layers, notably carbonate and evaporitic rocks. The term carbonate evaporitic crust refers to rocks composed of minerals such as limestone associated with deposits from the evaporation of ancient shallow seas rich in salt and other solid minerals. When the basaltic magma penetrated these layers, it formed various underground structures: dikes, sills, and diatremes. Dikes are vertical veins where magma intrudes through rock strata. Sills, on the other hand, spread horizontally between the existing layers. Diatremes are larger volcanic conduits, born of violent explosions mixing burning gases and rock fragments. These magmatic channels eventually spanned over 3 million square kilometers, or 1,558,306 square miles, an immense area on a planetary scale. Imagine a network of fissures and underground chambers where molten rock flowed on a large scale. Every day, hundreds of thousands of cubic meters, or 315,000 cubic feet of magma, seeped into the crust. Initially slow, this underground flow required considerable pressures and temperatures. Gradually, the heat of the magma transformed the traversed rocks, particularly those rich in carbon, leading to their decomposition. It was at this time that a massive release of thermogenic carbon dioxide occurred. This gas, formed by the extreme heat of magma-degrading rocks rich in organic matter or carbonates, escaped through fractures and volcanic conduits, sometimes reaching the surface. To this was added biogenic methane, resulting from the decomposition of ancient organisms trapped in sediments. Under the influence of magma, this methane was released and injected into the atmosphere or into underground waters, depending on the available evacuation paths. Thus, long before the major lava flows occurred on the surface, significant gas emissions were already taking place deep underground. Under the effect of heat, carbonate rocks released carbon dioxide, while organic layers emitted methane. These greenhouse gases, injected into the environment in a geologically short time, profoundly disrupted the chemical balances of the era. We better understand this chronology by imagining an active magmatic zone developing in successive waves. First, the initial veins of magma reach the lower crust. Then, under the effect of pressure, new corridors fracture the upper layers, allowing increasing volumes of molten rock to pass through. At each stage, the heat alters the chemistry of neighboring sediments, triggering an early release of gas. This initial phase corresponds to a vast underground construction site, drilling the lithosphere for several hundreds, even thousands of meters, several hundreds or thousands of yards. Though initially invisible on the surface, these events had a major impact on the atmosphere and oceans. When carbon dioxide and methane are massively released, they trap solar heat, alter the climate, and disrupt the chemistry of marine waters by dissolving. Scientists estimate that this gas release contributed to the environmental instability of the late Permian, even as the first surface lava eruptions were just beginning. The Siberian traps, as observed today, are the impressive vestiges of colossal magmatic activity. The vast basaltic plateaus, visible on the surface, represent only a fraction of the original underground intrusions. At the time, no one could have imagined that lava flows would reach several thousands of meters, several thousands of yards, in thickness, covering such an immense area. Yet, it all began with the infiltration of magma into the carbonate evaporitic crust, forming dikes, sills, and diatremes. This first stage triggered one of the largest sequences of geological and climatic upheavals in Earth's history. About 252 million years ago, Earth experienced an unprecedented volcanic episode. In a span of 60,000 years, massive lava flows, more than 10 cubic kilometers, 3.8 cubic miles per year, were projected into the atmosphere. This surge came from the present-day Siberian region and profoundly destabilized ecosystems, already weakened. The intensity of this eruption exceeded everything the planet had known until then, marking a brutal turning point in the history of life on Earth. The violence of the eruptions propelled gases and particles into the stratosphere. Among them, sulfur dioxide played a key role. Rising with the magma, this gas originating from sulfur-rich rocks reacted with water vapor in the upper atmosphere. The result, sulfate aerosols, tiny particles capable of reflecting part of the solar light. For a few years, this was enough to temporarily cool the climate by a few degrees, by reducing the solar radiation received at the surface. This cooling, although temporary on a geological scale, weakened organisms already under pressure. Faced with the abrupt drop in temperatures and reduced light, ecosystems had to adapt or disappear. Sulfate aerosols do not remain in the atmosphere forever. They fall back within a few years, carried down by rain. But the ongoing volcanic activity continuously released more. This led to cycles of repeated coolings over tens of thousands of years, imposing successive climatic shocks on species until their decline or extinction. In addition to sulfur dioxide, other substances such as chlorine, fluorine, and mercury have been projected into the stratosphere. Chlorine and fluorine can form compounds that destroy the ozone layer, increasing exposure to ultraviolet rays. Mercury, on the other hand, contaminates soils and oceans for the long term, threatening animal and plant life. Together, these gases and particles trigger complex reactions in the atmosphere, creating an unstable, dangerous, and difficult to predict environment. On land and at sea, living beings must now face a cocktail of simultaneous and persistent threats. The extent of this volcanic activity is measured both by the volumes of lava and by the quantity of gases released. With more than 10 cubic kilometers or 4 cubic miles of magma emitted each year, we are talking about one of the most titanic episodes ever recorded. Imagine a lava flow capable of covering a large city in just a few years. The most precise dating shows that this peak of intensity lasted several tens of thousands of years, a short period on the geological scale, but enough to profoundly disrupt the climate. Indeed, these massive emissions caused rapid and repeated variations in atmospheric chemistry, accelerating the global imbalance. These successive lava flows and the gases they released caused a wave effect. With each eruption, new aerosols were projected into the atmosphere, dispersing sunlight and triggering a temporary cooling. The planet then entered a cycle of seesawing climatic variations, directly linked to the intensity and frequency of eruptions. Once in the stratosphere, these particles remained suspended for several years before falling back, regularly replaced by new layers. The lands, often covered with ashes, saw their soil altered, disturbing the local flora and overturning the entire food chain. Today, the detailed analysis of rock layers allows scientists to reconstruct this exceptional volcanic episode. By studying the chemistry of the deposits, the nature of the minerals, and using precise dating methods, they retrace the duration and intensity of each eruptive phase. All these clues illuminate how the Earth can, at times, release enormous quantities of gases and particles capable of influencing the climate in the long run. Although the cooling caused by sulfate aerosols was temporary, its constant repetition amplified its effects. Through this volcanic impulse, the planet showed the power of its internal forces. For many species, these rapid upheavals represented an extreme challenge, proving that Earth remains a living, unstable world, guided by deep, sometimes uncontrollable mechanisms. Scientists consider this period a major turning point in the history of life. At that time, surface temperatures around the globe dropped sharply by about 5 degrees or 9 degrees. To measure such a change, they rely on the analysis of oxygen isotopes contained in microfossils called conodonts. These small, now extinct marine organisms had structures mineralized like tiny teeth. Their composition allows the reconstruction of past climate variations with astounding precision. Conodonts, literally conical teeth, had an internal skeleton composed of calcium phosphate. This material conserves remarkably well in sediments, making it a valuable source for researchers. Indeed, it records the chemical variations of the seawater of the time. When ocean temperatures changed, the proportion of oxygen isotopes in these microscopic structures evolved as well. By comparing samples taken from different periods, scientists can estimate the thermal fluctuations of the past. The sharp temperature drop deeply destabilized fauna and flora, causing intense physiological stress for many plants. The glossopterids, a group of seed ferns that then dominated the landscapes of Gondwana, were among the most affected. The sudden cooling disrupted their growth cycle, leading to a rapid collapse of their populations. The sudden disappearance of glossopterids shows how a sharp drop in temperatures can trigger chain reactions. Less vegetation means less stable soil, degraded habitats, and weakened food chains. These plants played a vital role. They absorbed carbon dioxide, produced organic matter, and maintained soil moisture. Their collapse, therefore, deeply destabilized ecosystems. The cooling also altered erosion. Without vegetative cover, the already climate-weakened soils became more vulnerable. Wind and rain accelerated their leaching, carrying large amounts of sediments and nutrients toward nearby seas. Linking cooling with the enrichment of seas may seem paradoxical. Yet, when soil erosion accelerates, it releases more phosphorus, potassium, and other nutrients into rivers. These elements then reach the oceans, promoting the growth of algae and microorganisms. While this surge in productivity may seem beneficial at first, it sometimes leads to imbalance. The water column becomes more stratified, mixes less well, and oxygen becomes scarce at depth. The cooling of the atmosphere and surface waters disrupts ocean circulation. If water layers become too stable, they stop mixing, preventing oxygen from reaching deeper levels. At the same time, nutrients brought from the continents stimulate the production of organic matter on the surface. As this matter decomposes, it consumes the available oxygen at depth. Thus, some areas sink into anoxia, or even euxenia, an environment without oxygen, saturated with hydrogen sulfide, which is toxic to marine life. Although this period is marked by significant cooling, its effects on the climate go far beyond a simple drop in temperatures. Seasonal variations, disturbances of living organisms, and imbalances in ocean circulation intertwine. Together, these factors trigger chain reactions where each element influences the others. This chaotic climate no longer follows a linear rhythm, but rather a complex and unstable dynamic, difficult to stop once initiated. As volcanic aerosols slowly dissipate from the upper atmosphere, a new shift occurs. These fine particles had acted as a solar filter, temporarily cooling the planet. But without this protective veil, the Earth suddenly enters a phase of global warming fueled by greenhouse gases. Temperatures rise quickly, marking a transition as sudden as it is formidable. Scientists estimate that more than 30,000 gigatons, 33,069,000 tons of carbon dioxide were released into the atmosphere due to volcanic eruptions. This gas traps heat by sending some of Earth's radiation back toward the ground. Under normal circumstances, this mechanism makes Earth habitable, but at such high levels, the effect runs out of control. Temperatures rise rapidly, pushing the planet toward uncontrolled warming. As aerosols disappear, another gas amplifies the warming: methane. Coming from the decomposition of organic matter, this gas is usually trapped in clathrates, ice structures trapping methane under the oceans or in frozen soils. But with the sudden rise in temperatures, these icy cages melt, releasing vast volumes of methane into the atmosphere. At the end of the Permian, this massive degassing played a key role in accelerating global climate warming. This massive release of methane further worsens the warming, as this gas is more potent than carbon dioxide in the short term. Once released into the atmosphere, it forms a new layer that traps heat with formidable efficiency. Combined with the carbon dioxide already present in large quantities, it causes a rapid rise in temperatures. It is estimated that Earth warmed by 8 to 10 degrees or 14 to 18 degrees in less than 100,000 years, a staggering leap on the geological scale. For marine ecosystems, such rapid warming is a brutal shock. The seas, which normally act as a thermal buffer, can no longer absorb this excess heat. As a consequence, aquatic life falters. Corals, mollusks, fish. Many species depend on stable temperatures to breathe, reproduce, or simply survive. The terrestrial fauna and flora, too, are being hit hard by this rise in temperature. Plants, which are sensitive to the climate for their growth and reproduction, have to cope with extreme heat and increasingly unpredictable precipitation. In the southern hemisphere, forests that had adapted to a semi-arid climate are facing more intense droughts or sudden episodes of humidity. On the continents, animals are trying to survive as best they can. Species capable of withstanding the heat or migrating to cooler areas are faring better, but those that depend on a stable environment are the first to decline. Geologically, the warming is accelerating the erosion of continental surfaces. In some regions, the climate is becoming drier. In others, rains are becoming sudden and violent. As a result, slopes are being eroded, and immense volumes of sediment are being carried toward the coasts. This outflow changes the chemistry of shallow seas, further weakening marine life. Even though these effects will intensify later, it's essential to understand that such warming triggers a chain reaction, where every terrestrial disruption eventually impacts aquatic environments. In this global upheaval, volcanism plays a central role. The immense magmatic provinces have released enormous amounts of gases, enough to shift the climate. As long as aerosols remained in the stratosphere, the planet experienced a slight cooling. But once they dissipated, the heat was trapped by the carbon dioxide and methane still present. With the atmosphere saturated with greenhouse gases, Earth then plunged into one of the hottest periods in its history. It's important to note that this climate shift did not affect all regions of the planet in the same way. Coastal areas, more ventilated, may have better withstood the initial extreme heat, while inland areas, far from the moderating effects of the oceans, were much harder hit. Despite these local differences, the global trend remains clear. Temperatures are rising rapidly, as evidenced by sedimentary layers and fossil analyses, a direct reflection of the massive accumulation of volcanic gases in the atmosphere. We are entering a critical phase in geological history, where the ocean is undergoing a profound transformation. Its acidity is increasing rapidly, to the point where the calcareous skeletons of many species are starting to dissolve. This phenomenon, known as ocean acidification, corresponds to a drop in the pH, which measures the acidity of the water. Normally, seawater has a pH of about 8.1, but at that point, it could drop below 7.4. In other words, the ocean is becoming much more acidic than it has been for most of Earth's history. This abrupt upheaval is mainly due to the immense amount of carbon dioxide released into the atmosphere. Once dissolved in the ocean, this gas turns into carbonic acid. This acid then releases hydrogen ions, which increase the acidity of the water. These excess ions reduce the presence of carbonate ions, essential for the formation of calcareous shells and skeletons. Normally, carbonate ions combine with calcium to form calcium carbonate, the raw material for corals, mollusks, and other marine organisms. But the more acidity rises, the harder this reaction becomes, weakening all marine life that depends on it. Calcium carbonate, the cornerstone of marine shells, exists in several forms. The most common and also the most fragile is called aragonite. To determine whether organisms can continue to produce it, scientists use an indicator, the aragonite saturation factor, also known as aragonite omega. When this factor falls below 1, calcareous structures become unstable, but at this point in history, it drops to less than 0.5. The consequence? Not only does it become nearly impossible to build new skeletons, but those already formed begin to dissolve. The sea, little by little, erodes what it once allowed to build. This rapid acidification disrupts an entire ecosystem that relies on the solidity of reefs to live, feed, and protect itself. Coral reefs, true underwater oases, are built by animals called metazoan organisms capable of producing calcium carbonate. But with the drop in pH and the decrease in saturation state, nearly 80%, or about 88% in imperial terms, of this reef production collapses. In other words, most corals and reef builders can no longer consolidate their structures. Even worse, many die before they even have time to reproduce. The pillar of marine biodiversity is giving way. And beyond the disappearance of the reefs, it's the entire food chain that wavers. At the base, there are tiny planktonic organisms essential to the functioning of marine trophic networks. Among them, radiolarians, tiny unicellular beings with silica skeletons and calcospheres, small vesicles made of limestone. Even though radiolarians do not depend directly on calcium carbonate, they are sensitive to chemical shocks. A sudden drop in pH can disrupt their metabolism, their feeding, or even their reproduction. The calcospheres, however, are much more exposed. When acidity rises, their thin walls dissolve, and it's often a sure death sentence. Calcospheres are excellent indicators of the health of calcareous plankton. In a balanced ocean, they proliferate and feed a multitude of species, from zooplankton to small filter-feeding fish. But when their shells dissolve too quickly, their population collapses, causing a food shortage for their predators. This imbalance triggers a domino effect that weakens the entire marine food chain. This crisis is not temporary. It marks the complete collapse of the functioning of the oceans. Even a slight chemical disruption impairs oxygen production and nutrient recycling. Corals, essential to creating complex habitats, are destroyed or no longer develop. Deprived of refuges, young fish become easy prey for predators. The chemical disturbances don't only affect marine fauna. Flora, especially the calcareous algae living in the reefs, also suffer. These algae, which need calcium carbonate to build their structures, struggle to grow or maintain themselves. Their decline accelerates the degradation of reefs and disrupts essential gas exchanges like photosynthesis. After a peak in acidification, opportunistic species often take over. Some non-calcareous algae take advantage of the decline of calcareous algae, forming dense mats that block light and suffocate the surviving corals. In this extreme environment, the oceanic biological pump, the mechanism where plankton absorbs carbon dioxide to transfer it to sediments, is severely disrupted. When populations of calcareous plankton decrease, less organic carbon is buried in the seabed. Additionally, the dissolved shells release calcium into the water, further altering marine chemistry. This vicious circle can lead to lasting acidification or fluctuations that prevent the ecosystem from regaining a stable balance. The acidification and rapid dissolution of carbonates lead to a massive collapse of reef life, with a loss of about 80%, or about 88% in imperial terms, of metazoan production. Simultaneously, planktonic radiolarians and calcospheres decline sharply, threatening the very base of the food chain. Without these essential organisms, higher levels from zooplankton to large predators will struggle to survive in the long term. At the end of the Permian, the oceans were hit by a dramatic upheaval. It marked the emergence of vast oxygen-deprived zones, called anoxic environments. In these areas, the concentration of oxygen is so low that most marine organisms can no longer survive. Worse still, some of these basins saw the accumulation of a highly toxic gas, hydrogen sulfide. This phenomenon turned the ocean depths into deadly traps. In some cases, this gas could even escape into the atmosphere. To understand the full gravity of this situation, one must examine the mechanisms that gradually close these ecosystems to life. The main trigger of this anoxic crisis is the strengthening of thermal stratification of the oceans. Normally, ocean currents and temperature differences ensure vertical mixing that allows oxygen to penetrate deep, while bringing nutrients to the surface. However, when a pronounced gap occurs between overheated surface waters and much colder depths, this mixing is interrupted. A true thermal barrier forms, preventing oxygen from reaching the lower layers. In tropical regions, the surface temperature sometimes exceeded 30 degrees or 86 degrees, further accentuating this separation. Cut off from any new supply of oxygen, the deep waters become traps, where the little remaining oxygen is quickly consumed by organisms and decomposition. Asphyxiation sets in quickly. As oxygen disappears from the depths, other forms of life take over. Microorganisms capable of surviving without oxygen proliferate, particularly certain bacteria that use sulfur instead. In an anoxic environment, the sulfur dissolved in the water gradually transforms into hydrogen sulfide, a toxic gas with the well-known smell of rotten eggs. In these extreme conditions, rare bacteria, like those of the chlorobi group, take advantage of this environment. They practice a particular form of photosynthesis that does not require oxygen. Instead of drawing their energy from light and oxygen, they use hydrogen sulfide directly. This unique metabolism earns them the name green sulfur bacteria, referring to their photosensitive pigments of a characteristic green color. One of the most striking signatures left by the chlorobi in sediments is the presence of specific pigments called porphyrins, true biomarkers. These molecules, derived from complex organic structures, are often found in abundance in ancient rocks, such as black shales. These, rich in poorly decomposed organic matter due to lack of oxygen, form in environments where natural degradation is slowed. During this incomplete decomposition, various compounds are released, including the characteristic pigments of green sulfur bacteria. Thus, When geologists detect these porphyrins in sedimentary layers, it attests to an ancient anoxic environment, often saturated with sulfur, in other words, euxinic. The progression towards total anoxia, followed by confirmed euxinia, has dramatic consequences for marine life. Seafloor animals such as mollusks, brachiopods, or crustaceans can no longer survive in such conditions. The lack of oxygen gradually eliminates sensitive species, triggering a cascading collapse of the food chain. Even surface organisms, still partially oxygenated, see their resources diminish, lacking nutrients from the depths. Fish, in turn, flee areas saturated with hydrogen sulfide, whose toxicity suffocates their respiratory systems. As the depths become dominated by green sulfur bacteria, hydrogen sulfide accumulates dangerously. This gas can also rise to the atmosphere, especially if a climatic or geological upheaval causes a sudden upwelling of deep waters. This phenomenon, already observed on a small scale in certain current seas, might have occurred on a planetary scale at the end of the Permian. Massive eruptions and global warming likely reinforced thermal stratification, promoting the arrival on the surface of these sulfur-rich waters. Such a release of hydrogen sulfide would have had catastrophic effects, as this gas is deadly for most organisms using oxygen. The consequences on biodiversity, both terrestrial and marine, are immense. On continents, sulfur gases from coastal zones can be carried by winds and pollute the air on a large scale. Even the most resistant plants do not survive high concentrations of hydrogen sulfide. The combination of toxic air and soils, fouled by sulfur fallout, accelerates extinctions. This upheaval is neither instantaneous nor uniform. Some regions, better ventilated or supplied with oxygenated currents, temporarily escape anoxia. But in many areas, euxinic conditions settle in durably, eradicating almost all forms of life. The geological records preserve the clear trace of this prolonged anoxia and the accompanying euxinia. Variations in sulfur isotopes reveal the key role of hydrogen sulfide in the chemical transformation of sediments. By cross-referencing these clues, researchers can date euxinic episodes, measure the extent of oxygen-deprived zones, and track their progression. This analysis, which combines stratigraphy, sedimentology, and biogeochemistry, sheds light on the course of major extinctions. This scenario of an ocean deprived of oxygen and saturated with hydrogen sulfide ranks among the darkest moments in the history of marine life. It shows how strong thermal stratification, by limiting exchanges between surface and depth, triggers a chain reaction. We are at a major turning point in geological history, where marine life undergoes one of its greatest catastrophes. The oceans, once rich in biodiversity, plunge into imbalance. Almost 95% of brachiopods and trilobites still perish abruptly. These two groups, pillars of the ocean floor, played an essential role, filtering water and providing habitat for many species. Their rapid disappearance reflects the magnitude of the shock shaking the entire food chain. In this dramatic context, xenocanth sharks and acanthodians also undergo near extinction. The former, recognizable by their prominent dorsal spine and slender silhouette, populated both seas and freshwater. As for the acanthodians, the first jawed fishes, they represented a major advancement in vertebrate evolution. Their role as predators of small crustaceans was crucial for ecosystem balance. Their disappearance creates a deep ecological void, disrupting the food chain for the long term. However, These losses are not limited to a few isolated species. Reefs, true bastions of biodiversity, collapse. They relied largely on sponges and bryozoans, small colonial organisms building together solid underwater structures. The former actively filtered particles, creating niches favorable to other species. The latter stabilized the seabed and provided habitat for many invertebrates. With their disappearance, an entire network of vital interactions crumbles. To measure the extent of this catastrophe, one must understand the fundamental role of reef builders in marine balance. When reefs disintegrate, the habitat of thousands of species disappears. Fish, crustaceans, mollusks, all lose the essential refuges for their feeding, reproduction, or survival against predators. The disappearance of these biological structures is, according to many researchers, a key factor in the massive decline of marine biodiversity. Normally, the filtering cells of sponges and bryozoan colonies ensured a stable primary production, the cornerstone of the food chain. Without this foundation, the entire trophic network begins to falter. The massive disappearance of brachiopods and trilobites deeply weakens food chains. Brachiopods, equipped with two valves similar to those of bivalves, filtered fine organic particles and fed specialized predators. Trilobites, marine arthropods among the oldest and most widespread, played a key role in waste recycling and also served as prey. Their simultaneous loss causes a cascading collapse of food interactions, pushing ecosystems toward irreversible imbalance. Paleontological studies conducted on sediments reveal that the disappearance of many marine groups occurred very rapidly on a geological scale. Fossil analysis shows a sudden collapse in the diversity of shells, carapaces, and fish remains, indicating a generalized decline in oceanic life. Several converging factors are at play. Thanks to stable isotopes used to track variations in temperature and marine chemistry, researchers have reconstructed an unstable climate marked by increased acidification and episodes of anoxia in deep waters. These extreme conditions weakened marine organisms, making the entire food chain more vulnerable to even the slightest additional stress. The consequences on marine life were devastating. Deprived of prey, the large predators declined, followed closely by intermediate species, which were also heavily impacted. The seabed emptied of its key species, the reefs collapsed, and fish populations were decimated. Ultimately, the entire ecological balance of the oceans of this era fell apart. Thus ends this long cascade of marine extinctions. The end of the Permian marks a period of major upheavals for terrestrial life. The continental biosphere undergoes multiple pressures that profoundly transform ecosystems. The atmosphere, rich in oxygen, favors fires of unprecedented scale. Fueled by a marked rise in temperatures and a dry climate, these fires devastate the vast forests of primitive conifers, ferns, and other late Permian plants. The fires ignite in series, sometimes over hundreds of kilometers or miles, accelerating massive deforestation. This releases significant quantities of carbon dioxide, reinforcing the greenhouse effect and exacerbating global warming. Meanwhile, the ashes transported by wind and rain enrich aquatic environments, locally stimulating some blooms but also causing a drop in dissolved oxygen due to the rapid decomposition of organic matter. In parallel, this massive deforestation deeply disrupts terrestrial habitats. Deprived of plant cover, soils erode more quickly, while sunlight, once filtered by the canopy, heats and dries the ground further. Animals that depended on forest cover for food or shelter lose their bearings. Large herbivores, adapted to an abundance of foliage, see their resources collapse in record time. Forests, once rich in biodiversity, become charred and fragmented expanses, where only a few too damp areas escape the flames. In this now hostile environment, terrestrial wildlife declines rapidly, trapped between the collapse of ecological niches and the increasing intensity of climatic conditions. This ecological crisis directly affects the survival of many four-limbed vertebrates called tetrapods. Among them, the therapsids, often overlooked, hold a special place. They are the distant ancestors of modern mammals. Already very diverse at the time, they evolved in various environments, some displaying mammal-like features, such as a more upright posture or a skull with specific openings near the temples. In the hot and oxygen-rich atmosphere of the late Permian, these animals thrived in semi-arid plains, taking advantage of sparse forests for living and reproducing. But the multiplication of fires, combined with the sudden transformation of ecosystems, drastically reduces their refuges, threatening these already vulnerable populations. The forces at play cause a massive collapse in tetrapod diversity. About 70% of species disappear. The therapsids are particularly affected, unable to keep pace with the rapid changes. The great herbivorous lineages, dependent on abundant vegetation, almost completely die out. The carnivores decline in turn, victims of the scarcity of prey. Some regions, once rich in fauna, become almost entirely devoid of life. Even the more resilient environments, such as wetlands or marshy areas, suffer heavy damage. Erosion deposits excess ashes and nutrients there, deeply disturbing ecological balances. Migration corridors are fragmented, and many species can no longer reproduce due to a lack of suitable habitats. In this disrupted landscape, the cohesion of the trophic network collapses. Dinosaurs have not yet appeared, and only a few lineages robust or lucky enough survive this massive extinction, thus retaining an evolutionary advantage for the next era. The disappearance of therapsids and other tetrapods frees up ecological niches that will later favor the emergence of new life forms in the Triassic. But for now, the situation is dire. Terrestrial fauna is decimated, forests destroyed, and soils, deprived of roots, erode rapidly over vast territories. During this critical period, intense volcanic activity released significant amounts of toxic gases, many of which contained halogens like chlorine, fluorine, and bromine. Propelled into the stratosphere, these gases interacted with the ozone layer, a specific form of oxygen situated at high altitude, which acts as a shield against harmful solar radiation. Once in the stratosphere, the atoms derived from the halogens trigger chain reactions that destroy the ozone. A single chlorine atom can disintegrate an ozone molecule, forming oxygen and chlorine oxide. Chlorine oxide then attacks other ozone molecules, propagating the process. The result? The ozone layer rapidly thins, allowing increasingly dangerous ultraviolet rays to reach the Earth's surface. This dangerous radiation, primarily composed of ultraviolet B, is normally filtered by the ozone layer. But at the end of the Permian, its weakening allowed these harmful UVs to massively reach the surface. The consequences were severe: skin burns in animals, alterations of plant cells, and disruptions in cell division. Plants, essential for photosynthesis, suffered particularly from this harsh light. Specialists have also identified deep mutations in fossilized pollen grains from this era. These anomalies suggest that the ultraviolet B radiation, amplified by the ozone degradation, damaged the genetic material of plant reproductive structures. These alterations weakened their ability to reproduce normally, contributing to the collapse of floral diversity. Already weakened by heat and resource scarcity, forests saw their natural regeneration drastically decline. Moreover, volcanic activity released gases like sulfur dioxide and hydrogen chloride, leading to acid rain. By dissolving in atmospheric water droplets, these compounds formed sulfuric acid, which, once fallen to the ground, caused significant damage to ecosystems. The acidity burned leaves, weakened roots, and altered soil chemistry, making plant survival even more difficult. This disruption had a ripple effect on fauna. Already struggling, herbivores saw their resources decrease further, with forests and grasslands no longer able to provide sufficient vegetation cover. Forced to travel long distances to feed, they found themselves exposed to unfamiliar, often hostile environments. This break in the dietary balance increased the overall instability of terrestrial ecosystems. Scientists estimate that this combination of factors, massive emission of volcanic substances, and ozone layer collapse, triggered one of the most severe extinction events in Earth's history. While the effects varied from one region to another, the mechanism remains the same. In the absence of the protective shield formed by ozone, ultraviolet B radiation reached levels high enough to alter DNA replication. Concurrently, acid rains, stemming from sulfur and other volcanic gases, finished destabilizing already strained ecosystems. As volcanic halogens disrupted the upper atmosphere, life on the ground faced multiple assaults. Fern spores and conifer seeds showed malformations, signs of intense environmental stress. On the ground, forests declined rapidly, giving way to sparse landscapes exposed to erosion. This soil degradation altered the reflection of solar radiation, disrupting the local thermal balance. The disappearance of plant cover also affected ambient humidity and rainfall dynamics, leading to increased climate instability. Ultimately, this spiral influenced the global evolution of the biosphere. Fourteenth stage of our journey. The peak of sulfur anoxia and its pyrite deposits on a planetary scale. At this stage, the oceans are deprived of oxygen and saturated with hydrogen sulfide, a toxic gas for most forms of life. This phenomenon transforms vast coastal areas into true chemical traps. Deprived of oxygen, the sediments become the scene of intense sulfur activity. The hydrogen sulfide present in the water reacts quickly with dissolved iron, forming pyrite, a recognizable iron disulfide with its golden yellow hue. These crystals deposit abundantly, signaling a profound modification of marine chemistry. Sudden pyrite deposits clearly mark sulfidic anoxia. In coastal areas, the abrupt drop in oxygen leads to a significant decline in molybdenum and uranium. These metals, normally dissolved in water, disappear in oxygen-depleted environments, indicating widespread euxinia. For geologists, this decrease reveals a breakdown in ocean mixing. Organisms dependent on an oxygenated environment suffer massive die-offs. The fossils found in these layers testify to this. Many species did not survive this chemical upheaval. In this hostile environment, copper sometimes accumulates in stratiform layers, evidence of the precipitation of sulfides that capture metallic ions. These sediments become dark. They are often called black shales, rich in organic matter and sulfur minerals, sometimes heralding the formation of future exploitable deposits. These strata also signal the rise of bacteria that derive energy from sulfur. The analysis of core samples reveals a sharp transition between deposits rich in fauna and these black layers dominated by pyrite, evidence of a sudden shift to an environment asphyxiating for the majority of marine species. The presence of pyrite marks a shift to an oxygen-deprived environment. By embedding themselves in the rocks, these sulfur minerals transform the structure of the deposits. Copper, attracted to the sulfides, can concentrate in sufficient quantities to form, much later, real mining deposits. These layers alone tell the story of the magnitude of the Permian's end upheaval. This lack of oxygen is explained by massive volcanism and a rise in carbon dioxide, which slowed the circulation of the waters. The deep layers stagnated, becoming enriched in sulfur. The detailed examination of these mineralized horizons offers a valuable insight into the links between volcanism, ocean chemistry, and ecosystems. At the end of the Permian, immense quantities of carbon dioxide accumulated in the atmosphere, while volcanic gases profoundly altered the composition of the oceans. The sediments recorded the fall of certain metals and the rise of sulfides, revealing the extreme vulnerability of marine communities. This ancient phenomenon shows just how much climate and life react to the abrupt disturbances of the carbon cycle and the modification of ocean currents. Today, these peritic deposits serve as a mirror. They help us understand anoxic dynamics in the face of current climate warming. Geological records remind us that at every major crisis, ocean chemistry can shift, endangering life itself and reshaping the planet's history. Here we are on the threshold of a major turning point in Earth's history, which occurred about 251,944 million years ago. At that time, the transition between the Permian and the Triassic was accompanied by a massive collapse of biodiversity, often referred to as the greatest extinction ever recorded. This upheaval is inscribed in a thin gray geological layer, 10 to 20 centimeters or 4 to 8 inches thick, which speaks volumes about the crisis's severity. It contains traces of fullerenes, carbon molecules shaped like hollow spheres, originating from geological or cosmic processes. There is also an unusual concentration of mercury, a strong marker of intense volcanic activity or a brutal environmental disturbance. To grasp the significance of this gray layer, one must first understand what primary productivity is. It is the ability of photosynthetic organisms, such as algae and plants, to produce organic matter using solar energy and nutrients. When this production collapses, the entire food chain wavers, as life depends on these basic resources. At the end of the Permian, researchers estimate that productivity fell to less than 5% of its usual level. The oceans, once teeming with life, became unable to support most marine forms. On land, the gradual disappearance of plants drastically reduced the resources available for herbivores and omnivores, further aggravating the global ecological crisis. The gray layer often appears as sedimentary deposits containing abnormally high concentrations of fullerenes and mercury. Fullerenes, compounds made of 60 carbon atoms or more, are generally associated with cataclysmic events like asteroid impacts or intense volcanic episodes. Here, their presence suggests vast volcanic emissions, possibly caused by major degassing of the Earth's crust. Mercury, a metal released by volcanoes or the erosion of rocks rich in this compound, is another indicator. When found in large quantities in sediments, it often signals volcanic activity powerful enough to disrupt the climate and ocean chemistry. Beyond geological evidence, the dramatic decline in primary productivity reveals a sudden breakdown in ecosystem functioning. Fossils of plankton, corals, and reef organisms suddenly become rare, indicating an accelerated depletion of marine life. This disappearance, coupled with the collapse of terrestrial ecosystems, marks an extinction of exceptional magnitude. When the ocean could no longer feed the animals, the food chain collapsed, causing a cascading death of numerous marine and continental species. Another fascinating aspect for geologists is the brevity of this extinction, estimated at less than 60,000 years. This duration is based on uranium-lead dating of zircon crystals, small minerals formed in magma that trap uranium. Over time, it decays into lead at a known rate. By measuring this ratio, one can date their formation precisely. Analyses indicate that the most acute phase of the crisis, associated with the famous gray layer, occurred in an extremely short time span on a geological scale, well under 1 million years. Why is this time span so remarkable? Because in geological terms, 60,000 years is equivalent to a blink of an eye. Such a rapid extinction reveals an abrupt upheaval. It is likely caused by a combination of extreme factors: massive volcanic eruptions, ocean acidification, sea level fluctuations, and atmospheric pollution. Together, these elements destabilized ecosystems to the point of triggering the collapse of many biological communities. Earth was then left depopulated, deprived of a large part of its fauna and flora. The victims of this crisis were countless, from the last trilobites to the great Permian reptiles. In the oceans, many thriving fish and invertebrates disappeared almost simultaneously. On land, most vertebrates also succumbed. The survivors inherited a barren world, where the gray layer, poor in fossils, reveals a frozen life. As the extinction spread, the food chain collapsed even faster. Forests receded, and only a few plant species, highly resilient, managed to endure. Let's return to the gray layer. Its thickness may seem modest compared to millions of years of geological deposits. Yet, it condenses the marks of a sudden shift: chemical, biological, and sedimentary upheaval. The fullerenes and mercury it contains act as beacons of this sudden degradation. Precise dating by the uranium-lead method on zircons confirms a sharp rupture in time, marking the chaotic transition from the Permian to the Triassic and the gradual recomposition of ecosystems. This episode remains one of the greatest biological catastrophes in history. The crisis was of unprecedented violence. It reminds us that Earth, despite its apparent solidity, can become fragile, and that a few centimeters or a few inches of deposits can reveal colossal upheavals inscribed in a simple geological instant. When the intense volcanic activity of the Permian comes to an end, ecosystems remain profoundly disrupted. In the oceans, life is scarce. Even robust species that survived the extinction waves either die out or persist in very small numbers. Scientists then speak of a sterile sea, as the seabeds lack signs of advanced life. Corals, large mollusks, and other oxygen-dependent organisms become practically absent from the sediments. The near disappearance of benthic trace fossils, these imprints left by burrowing or crawling animals, shows how drastically marine biodiversity has declined. Once, sediments teemed with tunnels dug by worms, crustaceans, or small fish. Now, these traces have almost vanished, indicating that mobile organisms capable of stirring the seabed are no longer present. The shortage of oxygen and food, combined with chemical upheavals, has transformed the seabed into a desolate and silent landscape. On the continents, the situation is scarcely brighter. Deprived of vegetation, the soils are massively eroding. Spectacular formations called lavacas appear. These are deep funnels gouged out on slopes, carrying away large amounts of earth with every rain. Without roots to stabilize the soil, even a light shower is enough to create ravines. The surfaces thus laid bare are sometimes colonized by thin microbial mats made up of cyanobacteria and other microorganisms, the only ones able to survive in these extreme environments where almost no plants grow. These microbial mats, composed of very simple communities, ensure the maintenance of a minimal form of life. Through photosynthesis, they capture sunlight and release small bubbles of oxygen, but they also produce chemical substances, sometimes toxic, to more complex organisms. Their dominance reflects the extreme impoverishment of terrestrial environments. In this devastated world, the food chain is reduced to microorganisms and a few highly resistant invertebrates. Animals requiring a lot of oxygen have almost entirely disappeared, giving way to an almost deserted landscape. On a global scale, the carbon cycle is profoundly disturbed. Once, large forests and calcifying marine organisms absorb significant amounts of carbon dioxide, helping to regulate the climate. Now, large-scale photosynthesis has almost disappeared. The carbon cycle is dominated by microbial respiration, the decomposition of organic matter by bacteria releasing CO2, and by fermentation, where microorganisms transform sugars into acids or alcohols, sometimes releasing other gases. This new dynamic accentuates climate instability. In this deserted world, with vegetation having practically vanished, microbial colonies now cover most surfaces. Along the shrunken rivers and in the former alluvial plains, there are large, gelatinous green-brown patches, populated by tiny unicellular algae and specialized bacteria. These mats dry out in the sun and then rehydrate with the rare rains, creating an alternation of dry and wet phases that further hinders the return of higher plants. The winds, laden with dust, lift thick, abrasive particles. In some places, trees emerge, but without foliage. In the oceans, despite a true biological desert, some species of chemosynthetic bacteria still manage to survive. They draw their energy from dissolved mineral elements, living mainly around hydrothermal vents where geothermal heat creates rare refuges. But these areas are too limited to sustain biodiversity comparable to that before the crisis. The almost total absence of predators and prey radically simplifies food webs. Sediment cores reveal a generalized collapse of ecological interactions. The survivors, too few in number, cannot halt the decline. Emerging from this phase of collapse, Earth presents an unrecognizable face. The continents are almost empty, covered with bacterial mats, and the oceans struggle to regain any vitality. For geologists, this period marks one of the lowest levels of life on our planet, a sort of ecological restart. The few fossils discovered reveal simplified communities dominated by opportunistic organisms. In this impoverished landscape, microbial respiration and fermentation become the dominant processes, imprinting their uniform carbon signature worldwide. It will then take millions of years to rebuild true biological complexity. Between 251.8 and 251.5 million years ago, new fissures opened on the surface of the supercontinent, releasing immense volumes of basaltic lava and gases, including carbon dioxide and helium-3. The carbon dioxide greatly intensified the greenhouse effect, causing rapid warming. As for helium-3, much rarer, it revealed the deep origin of these magmas from the Earth's mantle. These eruptions, following long fracture lines rather than a single central volcano, covered hundreds of kilometers or miles, piling up lava flows that reshaped the landscape. Meanwhile, the continued accumulation of greenhouse gases caused global temperatures to rise sharply. In tropical regions, the surface water temperature now exceeds 40 degrees or 104 degrees, a threshold rarely reached in Earth's history. Marine organisms, from small invertebrates to large prehistoric fish, struggle to survive in these overheated seas where oxygen is scarce. Reefs, already weakened by previous crises, experience unbearable thermal stress that prevents their regeneration, sometimes leading to their complete disappearance in certain coastal areas. On the continents, extreme droughts transform former fertile plains into deserts. Only a few plants, such as certain ferns or more resilient seed species, manage to survive in the rare regions where groundwater still provides some moisture. When we talk about extreme drought, it refers to prolonged periods without rain, marked by intense heat and strong sunlight. The evaporation of the rare water reserves accelerates, increasing stress for terrestrial fauna. The primitive large reptiles and the last synapsids still present, dependent on water points to cool down or hydrate, suffer particularly. The longer the drought stretches, the more the vegetation disappears, reducing shelters and food resources. This increasingly dry climate renders soils extremely vulnerable to erosion. Devoid of vegetation, they are exposed to winds and violent rains that carry large amounts of sediment to the sea. Coastal waters then become turbid, a phenomenon called turbidity. This opacity blocks the light necessary for algae and other photosynthetic organisms. The consequence? Primary production collapses again, further weakening the marine food chain. Geologically, the massive magma emission results from the formation of deep fractures in the Earth's crust. Magmatic fluids, driven by high pressure, ascend to the surface through networks of dikes and veins that traverse the rocks in depth. This ascent is accompanied by a sudden release of gases from the mantle, notably carbon dioxide, a potent greenhouse gas, and helium-3, which reveals an ancient mantle origin. After the immense volcanic episode in Siberia, geological activity begins to slow down. Around 251 million years ago, the magmatic flow responsible for the vast lava plateaus begins to decrease. Basaltic flows and underground intrusions, once frequent, gradually become rare. This lull occurs after the Earth's crust has already been profoundly disrupted, directly influencing ecosystems and major geochemical cycles. At this time, tectonics in Siberia begin to relax. The forces that were pushing magma to the surface lose intensity. The fractures, once gaping, gradually close, slowing down the magmatic rises. This gradual relaxation brings the beginning of stability. Seismic tremors become rare, and landscapes marked by lava flows slowly embark on a phase of durable remodeling. In parallel, the decrease in magmatic activity strongly influences the climate and atmosphere. As long as the eruptions dominated, immense quantities of volcanic gases, notably carbon dioxide, were emitted. With the reduction of this flow, the emission of greenhouse gases slows down. Even though the CO2 level remains high, a beginning of temperature decline is observed. This lull remains gradual, as the overall chemical balance takes time to stabilize. The decrease in volcanic emissions also allows the resumption of a key process, the silicate weathering of continents. This phenomenon refers to the transformation of silicate-rich rocks under the influence of water, CO2, and certain organisms. When the Earth's surface cools and stabilizes, this weathering becomes effective again. The rocks decompose and release ions, such as calcium, which can then react with atmospheric carbon dioxide. In the long term, these reactions gradually help reduce CO2 concentration. This process plays a major role in the slow sequestration of CO2. Calcium released by silicate weathering gradually combines with carbon dioxide to form carbonates like calcite or dolomite. These minerals accumulate in sedimentary rocks, trapping CO2 durably in the Earth's crust. During this period, lower temperatures and an abundance of reactive minerals promote the formation of these carbonates, thus helping to limit the greenhouse effect. As Siberian volcanism eases, the biosphere slowly begins its recovery. Terrestrial ecosystems, long affected by eruptions and extreme climate, benefit from a gradual return to more stable conditions. Forests, dominated by rudimentary conifers and other resilient plants, spread across slopes and plains. This vegetation promotes chemical weathering and soil formation, thus helping to trap carbon dioxide and stabilize the climate. The formation of new fertile soils results from an interaction between geological phenomena and biological activity. In some regions, precipitation becomes more regular again, leading to the leaching of minerals and accelerating their transformation. Microorganisms in the upper layers decompose organic matter and facilitate the circulation of nutrients essential for plant growth. This still precarious process helps stabilize the soils, retain water, and store more carbon dioxide in a developing biomass. Meanwhile, the oceans also feel the effects of the decline in Siberian magmatic activity. With fewer volcanic gases and particles in the atmosphere, the input of pollutants into marine environments decreases. Terrestrial erosion remains active, still delivering sediments to coastal areas, but the reduction of sulfur and metal emissions relieves part of the marine fauna. This chemical respite allows plankton to begin recovering, initiating the gradual reconstruction of more stable food chains. Of course, this period remains marked by some climatic and geological jolts. Adjustments persist, notably related to the reorganization of continental plates. Some sedimentary basins still experience sudden floods or dry-ups, fueling local instability. But on a global scale, extreme phenomena tend to subside. The decrease in volcanism gradually allows Earth to regain a more stable balance. Between about 251.1 million, 405 thus to 80,000 yards, and 250.5 million years, 404,160,000 yards ago, the Earth began to slowly emerge from the greatest biodiversity crisis in its history. After a massive collapse of marine and terrestrial life, one can observe the first timid signs of recovery. Although the oceans remain unstable, new organisms appear, demonstrating some resilience of ecosystems. Among them, the ceratite ammonoids, small marine mollusks with spiral shells, develop rapidly. Their sutures, simpler than those of later forms, reveal an opportunistic adaptation. They take advantage of conditions that are still precarious, but sufficient to initiate slow diversification. The ceratite ammonoids occupy different levels in the water column. Some evolve near the surface, others prefer the depths. Their diet relies on small, planktonic prey. Opportunistic, they reproduce quickly whenever conditions permit, taking advantage of the void left by the collapse of other species. Their presence shows that despite upheavals, the ocean is no longer completely sterile. It is gradually regaining biological activity. Near the seafloor, bivalves of the genus Clarea settle in benthic environments. Equipped with two symmetrical shells, These mollusks colonize coastal areas, adapting to variations in salinity and still unstable water chemistry. Like ceratites, they occupy the empty space left by extinct species. Their populations signal a partial reconstruction of marine life, not an abundant biodiversity, but a few resilient groups capable of surviving still challenging conditions, including anoxic peaks. Meanwhile, the emerging lands show signs of recovery. The landscapes, ravaged by successive climatic disasters, are gradually becoming less hostile. In these open environments, the first vascular plants to recolonize are the lycopodiophytes, an ancestral group that includes today's selaginellas and club mosses. With simple stems and small leaves, these plants, still dependent on moisture to reproduce, benefit from the absence of dominant trees. Facing less competition, they easily access light and establish themselves on muddy or mineral soils, beginning a slow vegetal reconquest. In parallel, another plant is colonizing the devastated lands. Dicroidium, a seed fern typical of the southern hemisphere in the Triassic period. While its leaves resemble those of classic ferns, it is distinguished by the production of seeds, a feature shared with conifers or flowering plants. Dicroidium adapts to poor soils and also benefits from low plant competition. Its presence marks a turning point in the reorganization of terrestrial ecosystems after the crisis. The communities of lycopodiophytes and dicroidium initiate the first signs of revegetation, bringing a bit of greenery to landscapes long deserted. This restart, still limited, marks a decisive stage. Where erosion and sterility once reigned, these pioneer plants begin to stabilize the soil, reducing runoff and retaining sediments. Their rooting facilitates the creation of microhabitats, attracting the first terrestrial invertebrates, like insects. Locally, the vegetation provides shade and mitigates the intensity of solar radiation. During this phase of reorganization of biogeochemical cycles, the planet shows the first signs of a chemical rebalance. One of the most telling indicators is the delta-13 carbon, an isotopic ratio associated with carbonates. After having dropped to about 7%, or 0.007 using imperial system approximation, it now stabilizes around 2%, or 0.002. This change reflects a decrease in the massive inputs of light carbon from organic matter or volcanic emissions. This retreat of the organic signal indicates that the ocean and atmosphere are gradually returning to a more stable equilibrium. At the same time, the planet shows subtle signs of improving its chemical balance. The isotopic ratio of carbon, known as delta-13 carbon, is gradually stabilizing. This delta represents the proportion between two carbon isotopes, carbon-13, heavier, and carbon-12, more common, and is expressed in parts per thousand compared to a standard. A very negative delta indicates an excess of light carbon, often from ancient organic matter or volcanic eruptions. Conversely, a return to 2% ECRs, or 0 pesos CO2 in imperial system, signals a more balanced input between organic and mineral sources. This shift indicates an oceanic and atmospheric chemistry on the way to stabilization. Another positive sign is the gradual return of certain trace elements, like molybdenum and zinc in marine waters. These elements are good indicators of the chemical health of the oceans. Molybdenum, essential for nitrogen fixation, concentrates in well-oxygenated waters, while zinc, involved in numerous biological processes, also varies according to the oxygen rate. Their reappearance in sediments suggests an improvement in ocean circulation. Water mixes better, oxygen is more widely distributed, and nutrients become accessible to marine life once again. In previous phases, vast oceanic zones were termed euxinic. This type of environment favors bacteria that derive their energy from sulfur, leaving behind specific biomarkers, pigments, or fossil molecules testifying to their metabolism. The high concentration of these biomarkers indicated hostile waters, toxic to most species. Today, their decline in sediments indicates a gradual return to more breathable conditions, conducive to the reinstallation of fish, corals, or mollusks. A more active ocean circulation brings new hope to marine species. By better mixing the waters, oxygen reaches the depths and gradually pushes back the dead zones. This slight recovery, although still far from a return to normal, initiates a favorable dynamic. Corals, for example, need a minimum amount of oxygen and a stable pH to grow. Similarly, many filter-feeding invertebrates, like some bivalves, depend on good oxygenation. This change could thus initiate the gradual restoration of reefs and revive marine diversity. However, this improvement is not occurring at the same pace everywhere. Some ocean basins remain partially isolated, with insufficient ventilation. The slow pace of chemical adjustments on a global scale delays the return to true equilibrium. Yet, this phase of reorganization is essential. Without it, marine life could not have recovered. The establishment of more efficient currents, the gradual dilution of sulfur compounds, and a more balanced management of carbon finally offer the necessary conditions for the rebirth of biodiversity. In terms of fauna and flora, the improvement of oceanic ventilation directly influences the reproduction and dispersal of species. Many marine organisms depend on planktonic larvae, which require a minimum amount of oxygen to survive in the upper or intermediate layers of the ocean. As anoxic conditions recede, these larvae gradually reclaim niches long abandoned. This recovery promotes a gradual return of diversity. Pioneer species colonize better oxygenated areas. Among the first signs of this renewal, the return of benthic foraminifera, sensitive to oxygen variations, is observed. Their presence indicates that some marine sediments are becoming habitable again, paving the way for other, more demanding forms of life. Other links in the food chain also benefit from this improvement. Predators, highly sensitive to oxygen depletion, find more viable conditions. Fish, heavily impacted by euxinic environments, are beginning to reinvest some abyssal plains in shallower seas, now less hostile. On land, the return of marine nutrients to the coasts also plays a role. Winds and rains carry enriched particles that stimulate the growth of coastal vegetation. This vegetation, in turn, provides new shelters and resources for terrestrial animals, facilitating their return and development. At the very start of the Mesozoic era, during the early Triassic, two new crises struck the biosphere, the Greece-Bacchian and the Dinarian. Occurring just after the massive Permian extinction, they shook a world already weakened. While some groups timidly attempted to recolonize terrestrial and marine environments, instability persisted. Reefs, like many invertebrates, struggled to recover sustainably before facing major environmental upheavals again. The first of these crises occurred during a eustatic regression, a global sea withdrawal caused by climatic or tectonic changes. This recession further exposed the already fragile reefs and decreased water circulation and oxygen supply. In these impoverished areas, corals and other sensitive organisms, unable to withstand the drop in oxygen, experienced high mortality rates. The withdrawal of waters also disrupted nutrient circulation. marine ecosystems depend on currents to distribute organic matter and oxygenate the water. When depth decreases, stagnation sets in, creating oxygen-poor zones where bacteria capable of surviving in these extreme conditions proliferate. These microbes sometimes release toxic substances, worsening the anoxia and creating a vicious cycle. Large filter-feeding organisms like some mollusks then have no choice but to flee or die, further destabilizing the local food chain. Then came the Dinarian, the second critical phase of the early Triassic, marked by hyperthermal pulses linked to prolonged basaltic degassing. This refers to the continuous release of greenhouse gases by immense volcanic provinces. Although less intense than the initial eruption peak, this phenomenon was enough to warm the atmosphere and acidify surface waters. Under the combined effect of heat and acidity, many already weakened marine invertebrates saw their survival plummet abruptly. Acidification comes from the dissolution of carbon dioxide in water, which forms carbonic acid. This phenomenon lowers the pH, that is, the level of acidity, and disrupts the formation of calcareous structures, essential to many marine animals. Among the most vulnerable are ammonoids, spiral-shelled mollusks, and conodonts, tiny organisms known from their fossil teeth. When acidity increases, calcium carbonate precipitates less easily, making these species more fragile. Already weakened, ammonoids and conodonts then suffer selective extinctions during the Griesbachian and Dinarian periods. This period is marked by high temperatures, sometimes beyond the tolerance of marine organisms. The warming increases their oxygen demand, while the ocean, depleted by anoxia and acidification, provides less and less. Animals must adapt their metabolism, which further weakens them. Pelagic species, like some primitive fish and the ammonoids, are particularly affected. When the heat persists, their physiology can no longer cope, and these combined pressures sometimes cause sudden waves of mortality. In this context, extinction does not affect all species in the same way. We speak of selective extinctions because some lineages manage to survive or even diversify despite the disruptions. The ammonoids and conodonts, already weakened, decline sharply, while bivalves or fish with robust fins seem to adapt better. Reef communities, however, struggle to regain their role as protective barriers and shelters for biodiversity, hindering the reconstitution of complex marine ecosystems. Today, the analysis of sediments and fossils allows us to measure the extent of these upheavals. Conodonts reveal, through the composition of their calcified structures, rapid variations in pH and temperature. Ammonoids, on the other hand, show phases of diversification followed by sudden declines, reflecting the difficulty in maintaining stable populations in an environment dominated by anoxia and heat. Between 250 and 247 million years ago, the Earth slowly emerged from the Great Extinction and began a gradual ecological recovery. In shallow seas, rapid diversification affected bivalves and gastropods. In parallel, archosauromorphs established themselves on the emerging lands, while Voltzialis conifers colonized wet areas, providing a more stable environment for many species. Carbonate platforms, typical of well-lit coastal zones, favor the rise of bivalves and gastropods. They form in warm, shallow waters, where calcium carbonate produced by microorganisms and shell fragments accumulates. This solid foundation offers an ideal support for the attachment or movement of many species. Bivalves, with shells and two valves, filter water to feed, while gastropods, often spiraled, graze on algae or collect debris from the sea floor. This expansion is explained by the presence of niches left vacant after the previous crisis. The climate, warm and relatively stable, maintains water temperatures between 68 and 86 degrees and 20 to 30 degrees, which promotes the proliferation of bivalves and gastropods on coastal platforms. Meanwhile, archosauromorphs diversify on land. This group of primitive reptiles, related to the large reptiles of the Mesozoic, includes long-necked proterosaurs and armored herpetosuchians. Their adaptations already hint at traits that will facilitate their conquest of terrestrial environments. In parallel, the return of Voltziales conifer forests marks a turning point. These trees settle in wet areas, stabilize the soils, and create a favorable habitat for fauna. Resistant to temperature fluctuations and irregular precipitation, they stimulate the circulation of nutrients thanks to fallen needles decomposed by many organisms. Under their canopy, archosauromorphs find refuge, especially in tropical areas where temperatures often exceed 77 degrees, 125 degrees. The trees also offer protection against some predators, and by absorbing CO2, they help slightly regulate a climate that is still unstable. Fires remain a threat in dry areas, but the moisture in dense forests often limits their spread. Some Voltziales develop thick bark, facilitating their regeneration after a fire. In the clearings thus opened, young shoots appear, accompanied by animals seeking new territories. Meanwhile, bivalves and gastropods continue to thrive in coastal waters, while archosauromorphs strengthen their terrestrial presence. Gradually, new interactions between fauna and flora revive biodiversity. Recovery remains slow, with some habitats still fragile. But over generations, many species develop effective adaptations. Mollusks perfect their feeding or defense strategies, while archosauromorphs enhance their mobility. As Voltziales forests expand, they gradually help restore a more stable ecological balance. The bivalves and gastropods, thriving on carbonate platforms, reveal the newfound vitality of the oceans. The archosauromorphs already herald the future rise of dominant reptiles, while the Voltziales conifers embody the strength of vegetation capable of supporting ecosystem reconstruction. Gradually, the planet finds a new dynamic, illustrating the formidable capacity of life to be reborn, even after the worst upheavals. Throughout this recovery, the interactions between mollusks, reptiles, and conifers gradually transform the landscape. Forests regulate moisture and temperature, protecting terrestrial vertebrates from heat. As they decompose, the plant cover enriches the soils. In the seas, marine organisms build calcareous structures that serve as a support for younger generations of bivalves and gastropods. This network of species, though discrete, strengthens the stability of the environments. Despite the aftermath of extinction, the period between 250 and 247 million years marks a renewal, driven by evolutionary innovations and new forms of cooperation. In the interior plains, abundant rains form temporary marshlands where pioneer plants settle, enriching the soils. These wetlands offer refuge to amphibians, essential links in the food chain. Their presence strengthens the connections between aquatic and terrestrial environments, promoting local biodiversity. Gradually, a more stable balance is established, despite persistent challenges. Overall, this period showcases how diverse groups participate in the regeneration of life. Mollusks, archosauromorphs, Voltziales conifers, and marine ecosystems unite in a shared effort, revitalizing the biosphere. Imagine a vast ocean attempting to recover after a long period of imbalances. The waters, once warm and low in oxygen, begin to cool and stratify again. In this context, a key phenomenon reappears: deep thermohaline circulation. This system of currents, triggered by differences in temperature and salinity, allows cold water to plunge deep, drawing behind it warmer waters. This natural mixing promotes better oxygen distribution, even in the great depths. For marine species dependent on a vital minimum of oxygen, this change marks a decisive turning point. This profound renewal instills a new dynamic in benthic life, that is, all species living on the ocean floor, from small invertebrates to more complex organisms. Thanks to the return of sufficient oxygen, several weakened colonies can prosper once more. Even partial, the resumption of deep circulation promotes more regular water mixing, stabilizing habitats. Sediments disperse better, nutrients rise more efficiently, and plankton benefits. In short, the ocean gradually relearns to breathe, benefiting all forms of life that depend on it. Meanwhile, chemical stratification decreases in equatorial regions. This phenomenon occurs when water layers with distinct properties such as salinity or chemical content do not mix. Previously, the dynamic surface remained isolated from oxygen-poor depths, frozen in stagnation. With the renewal of thermohaline circulation, exchanges intensify. Layers gradually mix, nutrients rise, and oxygen descends to the depths. This mixing significantly improves living conditions, from microscopic algae to the largest marine predators. In this context, marine life is experiencing a new resurgence, particularly in plankton. This term encompasses tiny organisms, both plant and animal, that float in currents. Phytoplankton, capable of photosynthesis, captures solar energy to produce organic matter at the base of the food chain. Thanks to better water circulation, these microalgae multiply, attracting zooplankton and then predators in turn. Thus, the productivity of equatorial zones increases significantly, once again becoming a pillar for the development of marine fauna. One visible sign of this renewed vitality is found in the resumption of carbonate deposits. Composed of calcium carbonate, these deposits come from marine organisms like mollusks, corals, or calcareous algae, which use it to build shells and skeletons. After their death, these structures accumulate on the ocean floor. When the water is less acidic and richer in carbonate, the deposits become thicker and more coherent, sometimes forming true limestone formations. This material promotes good fossilization, leaving future paleontologists a valuable testimony of this biological rebirth. This increased accumulation of carbonate also reflects a rise in benthic biomass, these organisms living near the ocean floor. With the return of oxygen and nutrients, underwater flora can settle once again. Sessile animals, like sponges or primitive corals, find a favorable environment to form new colonies. Slowly, these structures help rebuild reefs. In a regenerating ocean, true oases of biodiversity come back to life. Changes in the sediments are not limited to calcium carbonate. Microbial activity, discrete but essential, intensifies and accelerates the decomposition of organic matter, releasing vital nutrients. The soils become enriched, promoting the rooting of life. Simultaneously, these processes filter impurities, clarifying the water. Light can then penetrate deeper, allowing algae to continue photosynthesis. Gradually, the ocean regains its clarity, stability, and capacity to regenerate. It is the sign of a marine world ready to be reborn. At the end of the Permian, the configuration of the continents changes profoundly. It is then that a rifting process begins, weakening the Earth's crust and opening wide trenches, early signs of a new ocean. This movement marks the birth of the Western Tethys, a forming marine basin that will play a major role in climate and ecosystem evolution in the Triassic. When Pangaea reaches its maximum extension, its central regions become very arid, with moisture from the seas struggling to penetrate. The opening of an oceanic rift changes the game. Seawater seeps through the faults, connecting the ocean to the interior lands. This new coastline brings increased humidity, mitigating desert climates and increasing precipitation. Gradually, once dry plains become enriched with denser vegetation, paving the way for the sustainable establishment of many forms of animal life. The rise of hot materials in the mantle creates tensions that gradually fracture the Earth's crust. Over time, these fissures widen until seawater rushes in, forming new shallow gulfs. On their shores, sediments brought by rivers accumulate and give rise to so-called epicontinental areas, bathed in light. In these calm waters, algae and aquatic plants thrive, supporting a rich food chain from microinvertebrates to fish and marine reptiles. As the coasts advance, aridity recedes inland. Drying winds weaken, replaced by more regular rains. These precipitations feed a network of permanent rivers. Along their banks, ferns and seed plants flourish, attracting insects, amphibians, and reptiles that hunt or reproduce there. Gradually, these moist corridors create a more verdant and lively landscape. We then speak of stable fluvial hydrography when rivers flow year-round. Once seasonal, they are now regulated by a better balance between rain and groundwater. This constant flow transforms erosion. Rivers carry sediments rich in organic matter, which settle in epicontinental zones. As they accumulate, these deposits trap carbon from plants and animals, creating sustainable geological reserves. The burial of organic matter plays a crucial role in climate regulation. Under normal circumstances, its decomposition releases carbon dioxide, contributing to warming. However, in environments low in oxygen, such as underwater sediments, some carbon is trapped in the form of kerogen, escaping rapid oxidation. This natural storage slows down the greenhouse effect. A well-established river network carrying large amounts of plant debris enhances this sequestration mechanism. Along stabilized rivers, habitats multiply. In wetlands, insects and small crustaceans thrive, while some fish adapt their reproduction to more consistent waters. On land, herbivorous reptiles venture from their shelters, drawn by vegetation. Gradually, sparse forests appear, composed of plants resistant to variations. This diversity of habitats supports the progressive revival of ecosystems. Meanwhile, the Western Tethys begins its expansion. As the fault line opens, a sea arm penetrates deep into the lands, creating vast shores. These coasts host transitional zones between saltwater and freshwater, giving rise to rich lagoons or estuaries. Primitive birds and semi-aquatic reptiles explore these bustling habitats. The growth of coastal areas also favors the reproduction of amphibious animals, capable of moving freely between terrestrial and aquatic environments. During the Triassic, the stabilization of the climate marks a major turning point. Until then, carbon dioxide levels were so high that they sustained an intense greenhouse effect, destabilizing ecosystems. At this time, concentrations stabilize around 800 to 1,000 parts per million. This means that about 800 to 1,000 molecules per million in dry air are carbon dioxide. This decrease, although still high compared to today, remains moderate compared to previous peaks. It helps calm the climate and makes conditions more favorable for life. In this more moderate climate, tropical temperatures fluctuate between 32 and 34 degrees, 90 and 93 degrees. This may seem high today, but several factors explain it. At the time, massive continents are still joined, forming Pangaea. This megacontinentality makes the interior lands more sensitive to climatic extremes, as they escape the regulatory influence of the oceans. Meanwhile, vegetation evolves. Conifer and fern forests expand, while arid zones see the emergence of plants better adapted to drought. The biosphere slowly adjusts to this new thermal equilibrium. Beyond temperatures, megacontinentality results in the advent of seasonal monsoons. These wind regimes alternate according to the season: intense rain in summer, extended drought in winter. This phenomenon arises from the thermal contrasts between land and ocean. In summer, the continent heats up rapidly, creating a low-pressure area that draws in moist air. In winter, dry air flows toward the ocean. With the vast lands of the Triassic, these exchanges become spectacular. Monsoons transport enormous quantities of water and sediments, reshaping landscapes and profoundly influencing the distribution of animal and plant species. Progressively, the seasonal monsoons reduce the hold of ancient deserts. More frequent rains allow seeds to germinate in soils once too dry. Rivers develop, transporting nutrients to coasts, where marine life thrives. On the continents, fauna finds favorable conditions again. Herbivores colonize grassy plains, while some predators adapt to these more humid environments. The forests maintain a mixed appearance. Indeed, conifers and ferns coexist, supported by the increasing warmth and humidity, which provide a favorable ground for the diversification of species. Concurrently, more varied climatic conditions enhance nutrient recycling. In dry periods, soil loses productivity, slowing down plant growth. But when the rains arrive, they erode rocks, dissolve minerals, and redistribute nutrients. On the continents, this stimulates vegetation and supports a more diversified fauna. At sea, these regular inputs sustain the plankton, a pillar of the ocean food chain, and stabilize fish, mollusk, and invertebrate populations. As for primitive corals, they finally find calmer and richer waters, ideal conditions for the slow reconstruction of reefs. Climate changes do not occur abruptly. They are part of slow geological processes, like the erosion of mountains or the reorganization of river basins, stretched over hundreds of thousands of years. Similarly, the reduction of carbon dioxide is amplified by oceanic sedimentation. Algae and other organisms absorb dissolved CO2, then settle to the bottom in a mineralized form. On the continents, the burial of organic matter in sediments also removes carbon from the atmosphere. These combined mechanisms gradually contribute to stabilizing this greenhouse gas. In this more stable climate, biodiversity redeploys according to a logic of survival and adaptation. Resilient species occupy the niches left vacant by the Great Crisis. Some reptiles, adapted to contrasting seasons, thrive due to the new monsoons. Resistant amphibians colonize the now permanent rivers. Vegetation, less subjected to thermal stress, forms denser forests, offering shelter and food to the terrestrial fauna. Among large animals, selection favors those capable of enduring dry winters, followed by intense rains. This diversity of microclimates initiates a progressive speciation, despite the disturbances still present. At this stage of geological history, new soils begin to form on the emerged lands. The old Permian soils, depleted by leaching, give way to more fertile structures. The environment remains challenging, but certain natural processes promote the emergence of new pedogeneses. Soil formation results from the physical and chemical weathering of parent rocks, under the action of water, air, and living organisms. These rocks fragment. Their minerals transform into clays, giving rise to specific soils like vertisols and spodosols, essential to this phase of ecological reconstruction. Vertisols contain a high proportion of swelling clays, which expand with moisture and retract during dry periods. In the late Permian, this phenomenon is accentuated by a hot and dry climate, marked by the alternation between prolonged droughts and sudden rains. These variations cause cracks in the soil, which close up, trapping organic and mineral materials. Over time, these deposits enrich the soil with nutrients. But this mechanism also has its limits. Soil movements create significant physical and water-related constraints that can hinder the development of certain plants. Spodosols develop in humid and acidic environments, often under dense vegetation cover. Their profile is distinguished by an upper horizon depleted by water, which leaches soluble elements, leaving a light-colored and mineral-poor layer. Deeper down, these elements precipitate in an accumulation zone, rich in organic matter and iron. This contrast between surface depletion and enrichment in depth is typical of spodosol formation. During this period, the slow erosion of Hercynian reliefs deposits new sediments on the vast plains. Subjected to various chemical reactions, notably the hydrolysis of feldspars and micas, these sediments give rise to new clays. In parallel, organic matter from plants, such as wood fragments, begins to accumulate. It then interacts with these clays, initiating the first processes of forming rich and complex soils. In this context, organic carbon begins to fix onto the newly formed clays. When organic matter degrades, it releases compounds capable of adhering to clay surfaces. This physicochemical interaction stabilizes carbon in the soil and limits its return to the atmosphere, playing a key role in the carbon cycle. At the same time, microbial recolonization intensifies. Bacteria and fungi transform organic matter into available nutrients. Some plants also form symbiotic relationships with mycorrhizal fungi. They provide them with sugars, and in return, the fungi improve the absorption of water and essential minerals for their growth. This microbial recolonization is essential after the crisis. The past upheavals have profoundly disrupted the soils, and only resilient communities can restart nutrient recycling. Fungi produce enzymes that break down plant litter, releasing phosphorus, potassium, and other elements essential to plants. Over time, this biological activity structures the soil. Aggregates form, porosity increases, and water infiltrates better. Roots take advantage of this to penetrate deeper, stabilizing the surface. Thus, soil reconstruction accompanies the gradual establishment of plants adapted to an environment still evolving. These new soils replace the Permian paleosols, depleted by leaching, and contribute to the long-term storage of organic carbon. The pedological system thus acts as a climate buffer, moderating temperature variations and supporting the gradual return of life. The emergence of vertisols and spodosols reflects a diversification of soils linked to local variability, humidity, water chemistry, vegetation. This mosaic of conditions promotes the development of microbial and plant communities essential to the reconstruction of the biosphere. As these soils take shape, they become the foundation of a new ecological dynamic. Nutrients accumulate, subterranean fauna flourishes, and the first plants encourage the emergence of more varied vegetation. Rooting limits erosion, gradually stabilizing landscapes. At the same time, the chemical evolution of the soil supports the formation of richer habitats. We enter the Anisian, a pivotal period between 247 and 242 million years ago. Life is slowly recovering from the Permian Triassic cataclysm. Ecosystems, still unstable, are beginning their reconstruction, and some previously discrete animal groups are starting to thrive. In the oceans, ceratite ammonoids, ray-finned actinopterygians, as well as the first marine reptiles like ichthyosaurs and nothosaurs are taking off. On land, Cannemeyer-reformed dicynodonts dominate the fauna, profoundly redefining terrestrial ecosystems. Ceratite ammonoids, members of the cephalopod family, distinguish themselves from classic ammonites by the wavy shape of their sutures, the lines marking the junctions of their spiral shells. During the Anisian, they experience a true evolutionary boom. In the warm seas covering continental shelves, they adopt a variety of sizes and shapes. Some have thick shells, others more elongated and ornate structures, perhaps related to display or competition. By exploring new niches, from coasts to deep waters, they diversify at a rapid pace. Actinopterygians become one of the most dynamic marine groups. Their peculiarity: fins composed of fine bony rays, much more maneuverable than those of primitive fish with rigid structures. This flexibility allows them to swim faster and adapt to a wide variety of lifestyles. During the Anisian, they rapidly diversify. Some hunt other fish, others filter plankton, scour the seabed, or graze on algae. Their expansion reflects a marine food web in full reconstruction. Among the stars of the Anisian, the first marine reptiles take center stage. Ichthyosaurs, with their streamlined bodies and elongated snouts, recall modern dolphins. Their limbs, transformed into fins, allow them to speed through the water to capture fast prey. Nothosaurs, on the other hand, adopt a semi-aquatic lifestyle. They can swim in coastal waters but also crawl onto land to rest or lay eggs. Less specialized, but more versatile, they take advantage of shallow areas rich in fish and crustaceans, while basking in the sun in the tropical regions of the time. On the vast continental plains, new herbivores assert their presence. These are the Cannemeyer-iform dicynodonts. Their name, meaning two-dog teeth, refers to their large tusks, sometimes visible at the front of the jaw. Massive like oxen, with sturdy limbs and a horny beak, they efficiently graze on vegetation. Their activity is not limited to feeding. By opening up vegetation, they facilitate the passage of other animals, disperse seeds, and create microhabitats. Despite their ungainly appearance, these giants actively contribute to the structuring of terrestrial ecosystems under reconstruction. The flourishing of new groups reflects the major upheavals that occurred after the extinction. Coastal areas, once impoverished, see the return of primitive corals, sponges, and algae, recreating refuges for fish and invertebrates. On land, forests of primitive trees reform, providing an ideal pantry for dicynodonts and stimulating new ecological interactions. With average temperatures around 25 to 30 degrees Celsius or 77 to 86 degrees and rain more evenly distributed, coastal ecosystems expand, while some continental areas regain wetland environments. The world gradually takes shape again between constant warmth and the gradual return of diversity. This great explosion of diversity marks the prelude to the next stage of the Triassic. Evolution, patient but relentless, continues its work, laying the foundations of a world in transformation, a new, complex, and incredibly fascinating world. In the depths of a rebuilding world, reefs slowly come back to life. Guided by discrete builders, sphinctozoan sponges, and dasycladales algae, new marine structures take shape. These are the first pillars of an ecosystem seeking balance after the cataclysm. In an ocean undergoing rebirth, strange builders join forces. Sphinctozoan sponges, equipped with a honeycomb-like calcareous skeleton, patiently filter the water, capturing the tiniest nutrient particles. Their internal architecture promotes circulation and life. Alongside them, discrete dasycladales algae, sometimes invisible to the naked eye, also deposit calcium carbonate as they grow. Together, these two silent allies lay the foundations of a new world where marine life can finally hope to re-establish itself. In the clear, shallow waters, where sunlight easily reaches the bottom, a silent revival occurs. The chemistry of the ocean, long unstable, gradually regains its balance. The pH, that essential indicator of water acidity, climbs above 7.8, indicating the environment is becoming more basic and more welcoming for calcareous structures. At the same time, another crucial threshold is crossed. The omega of aragonite, which measures the water's ability to form limestone, finally exceeds 1.5. This means calcium and carbonate, crucial for reef building, are back in sufficient quantities. Thanks to this restored alchemy, mineral skeletons can once again thrive and build. This return to more stable chemistry plays a decisive role. It allows many marine species to grow without their skeletons dissolving as they form. Sphinctozoan sponges take advantage immediately. They settle on rocks, expand, and even build solid spongy structures that soon become a base for all marine life. In turn, dasycladales algae colonize these early elevations, weaving a thin vegetative cover that, over time, transforms into limestone sediment. This carpet, made of plant and mineral remains, becomes fertile ground, ready to welcome other fixed species, like small mollusks or other reef sponges. Over millennia, these pioneering communities gradually transform the underwater topography. They create reliefs here and there, paving the way for new ecological niches. Crustaceans and fish settle, finding refuge and protection in the cavities of the sponge structures. This dynamic gradually revives marine biodiversity. Sphinctozoan sponges and dasycladales algae are only the first actors in this renewal. They prepare the ground for future reefs, where hexactinid corals will soon take over. Hexactinid corals are cnidarians, animals equipped with stinging cells, living in colonies. Each polyp secretes calcium carbonate, gradually reinforcing the collective skeleton. In the Ladinian, the Middle Triassic, these corals take over from sponges as the main reef builders. Their success relies on favorable chemical conditions, a pH close to neutrality, and an increased saturation in aragonite, essential to the solidity of their structure. The transition from reefs dominated by sponges and algae to those built by hexactinide corals speaks to the complexity of marine balances, where the chemistry of the water plays a crucial role. After initially thriving in a newly favorable environment, sphinctozoan sponges and dasycladalin algae gradually give way to corals, which eventually build vast reef barriers, providing havens for a richly diverse fauna. This renewal illustrates the resilience of life, capable of reconquering the seas after a major catastrophe. We are entering a crucial phase in Earth's evolution, where redox cycles, those chemical oxidation and reduction reactions, are gradually stabilizing. Around 240 million years ago, this chemical balance becomes solid enough to usher in a period of relative calm. Atmospheric oxygen, after significant fluctuations, reaches a stable concentration between 16 and 18%, rounded imperial equivalent between 16 and 18%. Although lower than today, this level is sufficient to support a wide diversity of life, both on land and at sea. The stabilization of the oxygen level is not by chance. It results from a gradual decrease in the intense volcanic activity that previously prevailed. When magma surfaces, it releases gases like sulfur dioxide or mercury, capable of disrupting the chemistry of the air and oceans. As these eruptions slow down, Earth has time to restore its oxygen reserves and begin a lasting atmospheric rebalancing. In this new context, the still active, rare eruptions release much less mercury and sulfur dioxide than before. Mercury, now less abundant, is fixed in the form of stable compounds buried in sediments or absorbed by certain organisms. Sulfur dioxide, meanwhile, becomes more discrete and ceases to threaten the ozone layer. This chemical respite favors its regeneration, essential for filtering the sun's ultraviolet rays. The regeneration of the ozone layer spans several millennia due to a decrease in destructive gases and a progressive rebalancing of atmospheric chemistry. This renewed protection against ultraviolet rays allows life to thrive better. On the continents, plants colonize new environments, while in the sea, photosynthetic organisms benefit from more stable light. Chemically, the restoration of ozone is accompanied by a lasting stabilization of terrestrial redox cycles. The planet reaches an equilibrium between the production of oxygen by living beings and its consumption through respiration or the oxidation of minerals. This regulation creates a more stable environment, favorable to the emergence of organisms dependent on a consistent oxygen supply and good protection against solar radiation. Even though volcanoes remain active, their eruptions are now more modest. The gases released are emitted in quantities too small to cause major disruptions. Thanks to a less saturated atmosphere, oxygen circulates more freely between the oceans, soils, and ecosystems. Marine life benefits from better oxygenated waters, while forests thrive in purer air. Around 240 million years ago, the atmospheric oxygen content stabilizes between 15 and 18%, rounded imperial equivalent between 15 and 18%. Though slightly lower than today's, this concentration is enough to revive biodiversity, both on land and in the oceans. Soils are enriched by microbes that decompose organic matter and release nutrients. On the continents, well-established forests absorb carbon dioxide and release oxygen, supporting a balanced cycle. Earth gradually regains a more clement environment, capable of sustainably supporting life.